everyone, and welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm Brian Bonilla, an agency reporter here at Ad Age, and today I'm joined by former 40-year P&G executive, Pete Carter, who shortly after retiring in 2021 started his own consultancy, Creative Haystack, that focuses on matching agencies with marketers. Welcome, Pete. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, I want to remind our viewers that if you have any questions while you watch the program, feel free to leave them in our social media channels, and we'll do our best to get to them during the conversation and let us know where you're watching from. How's your day going so far, Pete?
It's good. It's a sunny day here in Northern Kentucky.
That's great. It's actually surprisingly sunny here in New York, which is a rare occurrence these days. So Pete, I have to ask, 40 plus years at P&G before departing, and most people I think would be, in Hawaii or on a fish boat somewhere. I guess before, we get into the specifics, could you lead me to, what you were doing right before your retirement at P&G and why the transition to Creative Haystack?
Sure. Well, before I had several jobs at P&G, but the last job that I had was as the head of an in-house consulting group that helped brands and agencies get to more effective advertising. So we did a lot of learning about what was working in the marketplace and then applied that to the brands as it was happening. So I was assigned, and my team was assigned to different brands, and we would work with those brands to help them get to the most effective advertising that they could. And this was all around the world. So my scope was around the world. I had people, I think there were 52 of us around the world who were strategists like myself. And then I also had a group of production experts. And so we would work across all different mediums and across all the major brands in the company. We covered about 80% of the net outside sales of the company with these 50 people. And as part of that, probably why you asked, sorry. As part of that, I started an in-house consulting service on agencies because about 3 years before I left the company, I was sitting with my boss, Mark Pritchard, and I was telling him, look, there's a lot of brands out there that are looking at non-P&G roster agencies and having them do some project work. And he said, oh, okay. I said, well, do you want this to continue or not? He goes, well, who do we know beyond, our rosters? I said, well, we know everyone at Publicis, and we know everyone at WPP, and we know a lot of people at Wieden & Kennedy. And after that, Mark, we don't know anybody. So he said, well, could you change that? And I said, sure. So I made it my mission and my personal mission to go out and meet agencies. And one of the first places and most productive places was actually the small agency conference that Ad Age holds every year. And so I attended that. And while I was attending that, I heard someone complain on the stage that, well, I hear there's someone here from Procter & Gamble, and boy, how do I get my agency in front of that? And so the next year, we sponsored something we called the elevator pitch, where we created an elevator at the conference, and people had 5 minutes to videotape a pitch to P&G. And then we looked at all 70 of those pitches, and actually we investigated 20 of them because we thought there was something we wanted to do more with. And from those 20, I think we ended up using probably a handful of the agencies that we had found at the small agency conference. So it was very useful for us and for the agencies involved.
And just so people know, we did the elevator pitch this past small agency conference as well.
Yes, it continues even though I'm gone, which is great.
It obviously continues. And the whole kind of aspect of this consultancy, it's a little different than maybe a traditional consultancy, which is ditching the pitch. So can you explain what exactly that means, and what, why is that important for you?
Okay, so while I was at P&G, we did start a process that was very useful and got a lot of positive feedback from P&G people who tend to be some of the most critical people in the world. Okay, and I mean that in a positive way, but still very critical. Um, the 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 way we did it was by interviewing a bunch of agencies. I could figure out what their real superpowers were
Mhm.
and then match them up with brands that were looking for specific techniques or skills that our roster agencies didn't have or didn't have to the extent that we would like them to have. And so
Okay.
this was a supplement to our roster agency proposals. We used a process there where, based on my recommendation and the recommendation of, I had a small team of 3 people, that we would, which included purchasing, which many of you call procurement, and then another guy who worked in my department and myself. And so the 3 of us became kind of the search team for the company. And in that process, we interviewed about 300 agencies.
Hmm.
And I mean, that wasn't like, we looked at probably 1,000,
Yeah.
but we interviewed, and either virtually because of COVID or before COVID, we were doing in-person visits to agencies. And we got a good sense of kind of what an agency feels like in that, and then a good sense of what that agency could contribute by looking at the skills and the work that they had done for other clients, and then recommending 2 or 3 of them to our clients. And then from that, they would choose one to do the project that they had. We had a 90% satisfaction rate with that among P&G people. So when I started my own business after I left the company, I used the same process. So what I do is, when a client comes to me looking for an agency, number one, I sit down with them and kind of ask them a series of questions about what is it that they're really looking for. Now, I will tell you, most clients will say the first thing out of their mouth is, well, I need a digital agency because I want to be with the digital world. And I'm like, okay, that's one thing, but that may not be the only thing and the most important thing. So then I usually probe about what they know about themselves, what their positioning is. And typically, a lot of the agencies or a lot of the brands that I've worked with, I do some positioning work with them because they're not precise on what their positioning is. And there's no way you're going to get great advertising if you don't know who you are and what your point of difference is. So I really work that with each client. Based on that, then I look at kind of what are the kind of advertising that they should be looking for. Some people will say, okay, well, if you're looking for a tourism brand, then you look for tourism. Yes, that could be a criteria. But beyond that, what are you looking for? So, like, I had a client that was in the tourism business, and yes, we did look at agencies that had tourism experience, but we also looked at agencies that could talk to moms because mom was the gatekeeper for this brand. We
Yeah.
also looked at the kind of where they were located, because this tourism company was actually located in certain places, and it may need some quick turnaround on things. So we were looking at things like that. For the Dude Wipes brand, we looked at, yes, advertising to men who had something there, but I also was looking for people who could do habit change. Because using a dude wipe is not the same as using toilet paper. How do you change people's habits to do that? And I also looked at, and this was probably the most interesting, agencies that had some experience with taboo products, things where you couldn't really talk about the subject matter directly. You had to kind of find a way around it. And so, and we were able to find some things based on that. So, what I do with all of this is I first go to the client with a list of about 10 to 12 agencies that might fit different pieces of your criteria.
Yeah.
Um, from that list of 12, we cut it down to about 5 or 6 that they are interested in, but have some questions about. It's at this point that I contact the agencies and say, hey, look, I got a client who might be interested in you. Can you give me some more detail on this aspect, or this aspect of your business, so that I can present it to them? They come back with that. I present something to the clients. We then go to the final round, and this is kind of the 3 at max 4 agencies that we are going to go visit. And the visit is extremely important because, too much of pitching happens because clients aren't sure of what the agency can do.
Mhm.
Well, I'm trying to give them an expert's opinion, someone with 40 years of experience of working with agencies. Look, here's my expert opinion of agencies that can do the work that you need to have done. You can check that out for yourself. But beyond that, you need to have an agency that you have a relationship with, that you feel could get you out of a safe room. Okay. If you were locked in a safe room, these people, you would trust them to help you get out of that. Okay. And that's what's missing in the pitch process. Too often the pitch is focused on the work at hand, and many times that work never gets the light of day. So it's wasted time and effort, quite frankly.
Mhm.
But even if it does get there, you haven't really established a relationship with the people. And so what we do in the visits is we go to the agency, we spend about an hour and a half with the agency. We try to have them show us their wares, and I give them a lot of feedback on here's what they're going to be interested in, here's how to maximize your pitch time with them. And then we break bread with them. We either have a lunch or go to cocktails or have a dinner together, so you can really get to know the people as people. And so far, the process is working just as well. In fact, even a little bit better than it worked at Procter. I'm getting like 99% positive comments about my process. So it seems to be working.
And yeah, definitely a few things to touch on there. And but for our viewers who maybe aren't familiar, Dude Wipes is a brand that got famous through Shark Tank and now is still going, and previously recently named Curiosity, a Cincinnati-based agency, as their agency of record, and they are an alternative to, let's say, toilet paper and baby wipes or anything like that for men.
Right.
I hope I explained that correctly, Pete.
I think so. I think they would be pleased with that explanation. And it's to avoid the streaks in your pants and the smell in your butt. Okay, that's what they do.
um, and um, so that's that part. You mentioned the you know you don't need to see the work. You don't need. I think you were touching on spec work, right?
Right. We don't need to see spec work, and spec work costs money. And any client who thinks that they're getting that for free is crazy, because you're not getting it for free. It is built into the price that the agency is giving you, okay, for the work that they're doing. Okay, it's part of their cost of goods. And so, you know, the that's one aspect of it. The other reason that I don't like it is because it takes a lot of time. Okay. Most people, when they come to me, they go, okay, how quickly can we get to an agency? like I've got something due in 6 months. And I'm like, well, I can get you to an agency in like 4 to 6 weeks.
Mm.
That's a lot different than if you go through the spec work process where you're going to see work, it's going to come back, you're going to revise the work, you're going to make some choices. Usually takes about 3 months, maybe 4 months. So I'm saving you 3 months of time, and also you're getting a better output, I believe.
Well, let me
Okay?
ask you, without spec work, how are you supplementing that? What are you looking for? What do you look for in an agency when, like, how do you kind of gauge an agency you're looking for a particular client?
Yeah, well, I judge agencies based on their creative output and whether or not they can create big ideas versus tactical executions.
Okay.
And I encourage my clients to look for the same thing, especially if they're looking for a new campaign or a first campaign for a product that's going to be broadly distributed. So that's my first criteria. And I look at the work that they have done and I listen to the words that they have told me about that work as to whether or not they really understand the idea behind it and not just the execution. And so when we go and do our visits, actually the agencies present work. It's usually work that falls into categories like I've described before, because that's the work that we believe is going to be the most compatible with the work that they are going to essentially do for the client. And that's how we kind of address that.
And is that a hard sell sometimes with some marketers? I imagine they're marketers that are used to seeing backward during a pitch. Yeah.
I think it is for a lot of people, but I really feel like they need to like take the step, okay? To if they can't see the similarities between the work, then I question their marketing ability, quite frankly. Okay.
Mm.
Like even I worked in hair care at P&G for a long time, and we always knew that if an agency could do food or do auto, they could do hair. And why is that? Because those are auto and food are very technical, and it's all about appetite appeal. Okay. And hair, believe it or not, is also about appetite appeal.
Oh,
So
that's interesting.
we found that those things translated very well. And so that's what I try to do is give my clients other options that will translate and let them see that as a way to look at the work, not just things that are specifically in the category or with the target that they have found.
And we actually have a question here from Aaron, who's watching on YouTube. How are agencies vetted in the first step? Capabilities, deck, a review of previous work, etc. And I would even throw like websites or awards of some kind. What do you look for?
Yeah, I look at like if I'm really starting from scratch on something, then I will look at other award shows and what awards agencies have won. Like I had a client that needed to look at some agencies that might be in the Michigan area. So
Okay.
I went to the Detroit Ad Club and I looked at who had been winning awards from the Detroit Ad Club in order to find some first, agencies. From that, then I'll look at their website. If I'm interested based on looking at their website, then I'll go and actually make a phone call and look at them. So the vetting process can start very, very early with something like awards or agencies I've heard of that are in the area or whatever. And then it gets down to, okay, do I put them in my database? I have a database of about 300 agencies, mostly in the United States, some outside of the US as well. And from that, um, I use to go through to when a client comes to me and says they need an agency, I actually painstakingly go through each one of them and look at what my notes are on what the work is they've done for other clients, and then what my feeling was about that agency and what I think their superpower is, and if I can see a match on the capability standpoint. Because really, it comes down to capabilities and chemistry. So, I try to do the capability and get that locked up. And then I share that with some of my clients. And then we go for a visit to see if the chemistry's right. And you'd be surprised that many times coming out of the capabilities, the client has a feeling like, oh, this is going to be the agency we're going to choose. And then what we find out is when we get to the chemistry isn't there. And
Mm.
you need both. So
Speak,
I think my process puts equal emphasis on both.
Speaking of chemistry, what are some examples of what agencies that you have seen, throughout the processes that you've gone through, even at P&G, through that chemistry session? What are some do's and don'ts that you've kind of noticed over time, or yeah, how are agencies standing out for you?
Sure, sure. Okay, so when I was interviewing agencies, there was a lovely gentleman. I forget where he was located. It was not one of the major cities. He had a one-man agency, and he's pitching to me because we were interested in looking at him. And he's talking to me about his agency, and he keeps saying, well, I've really based my agency on this book. This book really explains everything. And I said to him, I said, well, who's the author of that book? Are you the author? I was, no, 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 I'm not the author, but I think this book really, and I was like, dude, like, don't sell me on your capability because you've read the book. Okay.
Mm.
Not a good thing. Or I was doing a search for, notice I don't call it a pitch, a search for a client that was a Catholic hospital. And we went to do a chemistry session, and the agency starts cussing in front of
Okay.
the client. And I know they were trying to be cavalier and that. Hell, I've done that myself. Okay. However, um, it was totally inappropriate for this client. And I was
Mm.
thinking, oh God, you're killing yourselves, guys. Not the right thing to do. So I've seen some horror stories, or, I talk to agencies. One of the biggest things, it's very surprising, successful agencies, and yet you ask them, what's the idea behind this campaign or this commercial or this stunt or whatever that you've done? And they can't talk about the idea. They can only talk about, well, we knew getting a celebrity was the right thing, or, delivering the benefit was the most important thing. And I was like, not sure. That's not really an idea. An
Mm.
idea is a creative transformation of the benefit into something that the consumer can latch onto and go, I want that thing. That makes me want to buy.
And the other part of chemistry sessions that when I speak to agencies, the question is who should be at that, dinner or table, when you are at that phase where you're trying to decide, will this be the agency I'm working with? In your
Yes.
opinion, who should be at that table during a chemistry
I,
session?
I have a definite opinion on this. Well, I have a definite opinion on a lot of things, Brian, as you can tell. But on this one, I would say the most important thing is to have the people who are going to be working on the account day to day. I know that the agency leadership wants to be there. That's fine. They can be there. But please have the people who are going to be the day to day people in the room. And not only in the room, but please give them a role in the presentation that allows them to show their personality and their knowledge of things. Okay. And it's extremely important. I did a couple of searches where, yeah, they bring the right people, but then they sit there. Hi, I'm in charge of this and I'll be working with you on this. Great. And that's all we hear from them. And if we do a break bread session, definitely you want to have them there so that they can get to know the client, and the client can get to know them a little bit beyond the functional things that they'll do at work.
That's a good point, for sure. And it's hard because I hear both sides. From agencies that I talk to, you want the senior leadership there. You want the people that are going to be touching the accounts. But you'll be surprised at you know which agencies only send senior leadership or something like that.
Well, I give the agencies like a 2-page brief on here's what I'm expecting at the what I call the credentialing session, the visit. And in that, I'm very clear on I want to see the people in the room and please give them a role. And if they don't follow that, it's their own fault at that point, you
Yeah.
know?
And you've also worked with, besides Curiosity and Dude Wipes, you did a review for Legoland Resorts and Fireball, both of those going to small agencies, Cornet and Circus Maximus,
Mhm.
respectively. Is there a reason that you're working with small agencies? It seems like to start off, and um, yeah,
No, I think the issue is that I know those guys. Okay, that's one piece. And I probably, if I have a specialty, it's probably that I probably know more small agencies than the average guy that's in this type of work. That's fine. The I have done other searches where it ended up at much bigger agencies, and the issue for me is not that I want to push them to a small agency. The issue for me is finding the right size of an agency so that you're a big fish in their pond and you're going to get the attention that you need. I saw too many times where some of P&G's secondary brands, which were not the market leaders, but we had given it to an agency. And because the agencies were these big holding companies, they got very little attention. So I'm trying to change that.
one more question we have coming in from Ram, also on YouTube. Do you believe in it if an agency has to declare its values on their website so that it's better for clients to choose right based on resonant values?
Yeah, I think values come into the equation. I try to keep the search to as the factual things that I can. However, there are certain things that clients will tell me that they're looking for. Maybe they're looking for a female owned agency or a minority owned agency. Yes, I have those in the works as well. And so we will look at those kinds of things. Or if there are certain agencies that like to do certain kind of work, I will keep that in mind when I'm recommending an agency to a client. And so, yes, it's nice to understand what the values are, but too often I think, and maybe I'm just an old guy here, but I'm looking at the work. Okay. And I know you have an agency and you have people and you attract a certain type of person. That's great. But if it doesn't lead to better work, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be excited about your agency.
Yeah.
That's just
Uh,
my personal point of view.
we have time for maybe one or two questions. I did, because you do speak to a lot of small agencies, and we have recently been seeing small agencies winning bigger accounts. It seems like uh, uh, these past 2 years. Do you feel like that's a trend, or do you feel like small agencies are getting those opportunities more often?
I would hope they are. Let's put it that way, because I do believe that there's a lot of wrong sizing in the world, or clients. I had a client a potential client, let's put it that way, that asked me to help them. And I was kind of booked up and really had no capacity because I'm a one-man show. But I said to them, I said, well, who are you looking at yourself that you're interested in? And they gave me a list of all of these agencies, and they were all big names. And I thought, you know what? Most of those agencies are not going to be interested in you as a client. You're not that big of a fish to do that. And so I would suggest you look at more medium size or smaller agencies, and to get a list that is useful to you, where you can not only be a bigger fish, but they will want to work on that business. Especially like in one case, the client told me they were going to pitch. And I said, sorry, I'm out. I'm not going to help you at all. I don't want any agency finding out that I've given a name to somebody who's doing a pitch. Not going to happen.
Look at
So
that.
that's where I draw the line. That's the beauty of being retired and doing some work as a side hustle here.
And the final question we have, the other aspect of it, besides the size, I was thinking about was independent agencies. We're seeing a lot of independent agencies win big accounts, and you obviously work with a lot of them. Do you think that's an asset for an agency to be independent these days?
I think again, it depends on the client.
Mhm.
Like P&G was working with holding companies because they had international networks, and we like to work with international groups so that we could spread good work around the world and do it very quickly. If you're not dealing with that, then obviously you don't need that kind of a network. A lot of independent agencies, however, are associated with independent agency networks that they can tap into. And so I've met a couple of those as well. So it really depends on what the client is looking for. And I really try to say, okay, this is who you are. This is the box you're in. Let's try to make it, let's find an agency that's really good at that box. Or maybe it's not who you are today, but who you're aspiring to be. Let's find an agency that will meet your aspiration. That's fine too.
About the independent networks. There's so many now that I don't even think people realize. If you're not fully steeped into the industry, I don't know if people realize that, honestly.
No, it's there's independent networks. There's a lot of smaller agencies that use other agencies to supplement their
Mhm.
work. Hell, the name agency and advertising agency is a misnomer because I've looked at production companies that have creative capability. Okay. I've looked at independent networks of creatives. I'll call it a guild of some kind. Okay. That they're looking, and P&G hired one to do some work one time, and it was really good. So, there's that kind of thing. It's what I shy away from is people who are not really about creating big campaign ideas for a brand. That's not what my focus is.
Okay.
Okay. So if they do that, or if they're a design agency that has creative capability, I've looked at some of those as well. And I just try to shy away from places where there is not a clear conceptual, creative, persuasive ability. And it's really about persuasion, right? That's what a campaign should do for you. It should persuade people to buy your product in preference to others. That's what I want.
I think you said it best in the beginning. It's about finding that superpower. Pete, I want to thank you for joining us. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure it's the first of many conversations we'll have about this topic. But um, I want to thank you again for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Brian. Great to talk to you. And hopefully if I've said something that people have questions about, they can contact me at Pete at creativehaystack.com. Easy.
And time for our plug. Be sure to tune in. I hope you enjoyed our episode. Be sure to tune in on our upcoming episodes of Remotely. You can find out more at adage.com/remotely and hear more about our brands and agencies can work better together at Adage Next CMO. That's on December 7th in New York. Find out more at adage.com/CMO. As always, I'd like to thank the Adage crew that works very hard on these programs. Lauren Chiardo, Arabella Beck, and Anna Sekula for making this live stream happen. Thank you so much.